Good morning, church. It's great to be here with you guys. My name is Patrick Genova. My wife and I, we lead the youth and family ministry here in the Southern Connecticut Church of Christ, and really excited to be with you guys this morning. And I have a topic today that I hope can encourage us, although it might start off sounding not so encouraging, but it's something I've been thinking a lot about lately, and it is called surviving the wilderness. So right now, the best way I can describe kind of our current existence is something I've been reading a lot about in the Bible is Exodus and the Exodus journey through the desert and just how they were able to navigate it all. I mean, at first they thought it was going to be a short trip. Then it turned out to be a much longer trip, and it was just riddled with all of these kind of different temptations and hardships and different things along the way. And it was for 40 years. The Israelites spent in the desert. And, it's been tough. It's been tough for us, but can you imagine another, 39 and a half years of this, right? What's been going on right now? I mean, I couldn't imagine it, honestly. I wouldn't want to imagine it. When you think about these like survival movies, we got, Jungle, the movie Everest, 127 Hours, Castaway, that's one of Lamisha and I's favorite, Wilson, Tragic Scene, Life of Pi, that was another great one. I mean, Apollo 13 is also a movie of survival, and you just see like, man, they're hard pressed. This is hard times, and they find a way to band together and figure it out, or if they're by themselves, they invent somebody to band together with and figure it out in the case of Wilson. But right now, although it might not be as physically challenging as like the elements and facing the wilderness, it certainly is a time of spiritual wilderness and spiritual survival for many of us right now. And I want to pick up our story in Exodus. And, the Israelites, they just left the desert of sin. And what do you think happened there? Some sin. They grumbled. This was like 2 months after they left Egypt. They already start to grumble and complain, and they didn't have water. And Moses is like, guys, this was in the Valley of Sin. Guys, we just saw everything God did. Of course he's going to give us water. And of course he's going to give us food. And so then this manna from heaven falls down, and not too long after that, they make their way to the Rephidim Valley here. And it doesn't get any better, honestly. Even though, God has provided food from heaven, they still so quickly forget. And, as we talk about surviving the wilderness, and we're going to pick this story up here in the Rephidim Valley, I think the first thing to making it through the wilderness is that we have to suspect the best in people. Now, I use that word suspect because often we suspect the worst in people sometimes, right? But when you're in the wilderness, where so much can go wrong and we're up against so much pressure, more than ever, I mean, even as a Christian in general, we should, but more than ever right now, we need to suspect the best in people. One of the major undoings of the Israelites, or that first generation of the Israelites in the wilderness, was they just didn't suspect the best in each other. In Moses, they grumbled. They complained. They didn't see that they were really grumbling against God, and they really just weren't able to see kind of the good. And then, I mean, hey, you're in the wilderness. It is really, really tough. It's harder to see the good. You have to strive to see the good. You have to really work towards it. And, in the case of Moses, who's trying to do the best he can, he's doing everything he could. And sometimes for us too, we're trying to do the best we can, but people can still misunderstand us. People can still misunderstand our intentions, misunderstand our motivations. Whether you're a Christian or not, whether you try to live upright or morally or not, you'll still be misunderstood. And I think one of the hardest things in life is just being okay with being misunderstood, but also extending to people, not inserting some kind of negative story when we have a misunderstanding, but really giving people the benefit of the doubt, really suspecting the best in people. So in Exodus chapter 17, verse 1, we'll pick up this story. Like I said, we're in the Rephidim Valley here. And Exodus chapter 17, verse 1, it says, The whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So they quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Moses replied, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?" But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. They said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?" And Moses cried out to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They're almost ready to stone me." The Israelites had a major misunderstanding. They said, "Moses, why did you bring us up out of Egypt?" It wasn't Moses that brought them out of Egypt. It was God, and God used Moses. And so with this misunderstanding, they become accusatory of Moses. And Moses, of course, cries out to God. God, in his grace and his patience, he actually gives them water out of a rock. But if you were Moses right now, how would you be feeling? How would you be feeling? You think you're doing a good thing. You think you're helping. You think you're part of the solution. And people very quickly want to stone you. I think this was devastating for Moses. And without his relationship with God, I don't know that he would have been able to withstand not only the desert, but also his own people really hating him and wanting to kill him. And I know that about Moses because it's not his first time being misunderstood. And it's not his first time trying to do the right thing, but people placing kind of ill motivation on what he was doing. In Acts chapter 7, verse 25, Stephen, one of the first martyrs in Christianity, before he's martyred, he gives this speech throughout the history of Israel. He kind of recounts it. He summarizes it. And in reference to, something Moses did earlier, this is what Stephen says. In Acts chapter 7, verse 25, he says, "Moses thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them, but they did not." Moses, trying to do the best he could, was hoping people would understand that he was coming from a good place. Hope that people understood that he was trying his best to do the right thing. But people just didn't understand him. People just didn't want to embrace the fact that he could really be trying to do the right thing. I don't know if you can relate. Just feeling misunderstood. Feeling like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not trying to say that. You think I'm saying that, but I'm not. And I think right now in our virtual world that we're living in, misunderstandings are compounded. I mean, if you have a misunderstanding face to face, that you can work through that. But now it's like virtual misunderstandings and telephone and text and all these different things, right? It can really lead to some. It's an environment where misunderstandings can take place so easily. And if we're not careful, Satan can really use those misunderstandings to make us think ill of people, to make us think ill of each other. And we got to fight to not do that. We have to really suspect the best in each other. It's funny, when Lamisha and I were in Spain, there's a lot of cultural differences while we were living in Spain. And one of those was the amount of time you spend together for meals. And, here in the States, we kind of say, hey, I have about an hour to grab some lunch with you. I can meet from, 2 to 3:30, or I can, and we kind of schedule it out. And, in Spain, that comes across much more like, what is this, a business meeting? You have to put me in your schedule. And if you don't, spend at least, 2.5, 3 hours, or be willing to, at the very least, it can come across like I'm not that important to you. And we can place, and it was a struggle for Lamisha and I think for some of my Spanish brothers and sisters to see the best in each other through some of these misunderstandings, that we did want to spend time with you, but our value system was very based on efficiency, whereas a lot of their value system was based on just family. And who cares if it's 3 hours, 4 hours, but let's be a mess together. If you need to cry, let's cry together. And here in our culture, it's like, well, how long can I kind of keep myself together and be polite? And maybe 2 hours is my limit before I start breaking down, So that's when we want to leave. There it's like, no, let's just be messy together. And I think there's beauty in both, right? But these kind of misunderstandings can lead to inserting a story that's maybe not so charitable towards the other person. You know, and I want to ask you today, do you suspect the best in others when you have a misunderstanding with somebody? We have to be able to suspect the best in other people. We have to assume the best about each other. This is an interesting. I want to read this passage. It's from a sin list, and it's an interesting sin that's mentioned here, and something that it was a couple years back. It caught my eye, and I was like, wow, I never really thought about that to this degree. And so in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 3 through 4, we're gonna read this. It says, "If anyone teaches otherwise and does not agree to sound instruction of our Lord Jesus Christ and to godly teaching, they are conceited and understand nothing," right? So he's just saying, like, look, sound instruction and believing in that, it is the truth, and it becomes clear. And so to not believe in the sound teaching when it's clearly obvious, you can research, you can look it up, it also rings true in our hearts. He's saying that there's something else at work there that's keeping you from understanding this message. But then he goes into a couple aspects of the sinful nature. He says they have an unhealthy interest in controversies and quarrels about words that result in envy, strife, malicious talk, and here's the interesting sin: evil suspicions. I thought that was very interesting. Evil suspicions being sinful. And I had to look it up, and basically it comes down to, when somebody differs from you, or even when an opinion differs from you, is to assume ill of that person, to assume bad, something, an evil suspicion, like a paranoia about why they did what they did, or why they said what they said. And it's kind of like making a judgment, but a judgment that puts malice into that. Like, you think that they're being malicious, And I just thought that was so interesting, because right now, and I don't know about you, but being home or watching the news or going on social media, you can get to a negative place. You can get to a dark place where you can see wrong so easily all around you. And, it's interesting because I was talking to Lamisha about this the other day, and when I turn on the news or go online, I've had to put even boundaries with how much social media I consume lately. Is like, I come away feeling like we're like everything is really about to, like, it's about to be game over. It is so dark. Satan is trying to work on our fears right now. Satan is trying to get us to be scared, to get us to think ill of each other, and we can't let him. Let's look with our own eyes. Let's look through this lens of Christ into the rest of the world. My second point here in surviving the wilderness. First point, let's suspect the best in each other. My second point is, don't do it alone. To make it through the wilderness, we can't do it alone. And if you're Moses in this case, all right, so let's check this out. You have your own people who, in your mind, God used you to help them, and they're grumbling against you, not just grumbling against you, but they also want to stone you, all right? And now what's happening in this chapter is that you have a foreign army that's going to attack you. It's the Amalekites. So you got people grumbling against you. Here comes a foreign, and they're bad. They're a raiding nation. They raid to either steal and plunder, or they sometimes just do it for fun. And so they're like these bullies, and they're now coming to attack you guys. And you're in the wilderness. You just left, captivity with very little. So this would be like if you're having, a conflict with your friends, and then some other friend group wants to attack you, or it's like you're dealing with something within your family, like a personal situation, but then there's also a job situation that starts to take a turn for the worst. It's just these compounding negative kind of situations, right? How would you be feeling right now? Maybe some of you understand exactly how Moses is feeling right now. So we're going to read in Exodus chapter 17, verse 10. It says, so Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. And so we see what happens to Moses here. He says, as long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. When Moses' hands grew tired, they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held his hands up, one on one side, one on the other, so that his hands remained steady till sunset. So Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with the sword. So we don't know if Moses' hands being raised actually was God, working through his hands being raised, or whether it was, since the Israelites knew Moses' special connection with God, if it was, symbolic in nature. But regardless, it was very important for Moses to keep his hands raised. It had a material effect on the winning or losing of this battle. But here's the reality: is Moses was not superhuman. You and me, we are not superhuman, and we are subject to getting tired. We are subject to getting fatigued. And that is exactly what happened to Moses. His arms got tired. Can you relate to getting tired? Can you relate to your arms getting heavy and tired? Can your soul getting heavy and tired, spiritually feeling heavy and tired? This is where we need each other. When we are tired, when our arms are tired, this is where we need each other. In Galatians chapter 6, verse 2, it says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. We got to carry each other's burdens. Carry each other's burdens. And some of us have greater burdens than other people. And we need to be willing to carry each other's burdens through this time. And we have to be willing to let others carry our burdens through this time. I mean, when they went to go hold up Moses' arms, Moses wasn't like, get off me, I'm good. He let them carry his burdens, right? And so we got to do a little bit of both. Let people carry our burdens and also go to carry other people's burdens, because that's how we're going to make it through the wilderness. I'll tell you a quick story here. When I was 11 years old, it was an awesome experience. My dad took me on a 100-mile bike ride. It was to raise money, and I don't know, being 11 years old, 100-mile bike ride, okay, yeah, let's do it. My dad definitely had a lot of belief in me, for sure. Anyways, I'm on this bike ride, and we get to this 90-mile mark. Supposedly, we're at 90 miles, and my legs just turned into jello. And I'm watching this van drive by, and it's got all these people that they're picking up along the way, and because they quit, they stopped. And I'm thinking I'm going to be one of them. It was kind of like a shameful, but they were awesome. I mean, they drove by in the van, they were cheering us on, and in my mind, I just wanted to finish, but I knew that my legs were rubber. I couldn't even finish. And I just remember, and it was such a cool moment because, for me, it's a reminder. It was this moment where I'm riding, my legs are rubber, and my dad just puts his hand on on the handlebars, and he just basically carries me the last 10 miles, doing kind of double duty himself. And I always remember that feeling of relief that I felt. My legs are just totally jello. And just the relief of getting that support, I was like, wow, okay, maybe I can finish. In my mind, I was like, there's no way. But now with that, it's maybe I can finish. But imagine if, I quit before that moment. I would have never got the benefit of that, of that moment, for me and my dad, but also the analogy I now have about how God, when we're just about to give up, helps carry us through. How we, for each other, when we're just about to give up, somebody comes and they encourages us. Somebody comes and they serve us. It's incredible to be able to carry each other's burdens, and the feeling that we can feel when somebody else can really help us. And you feel that wow, all right, I think maybe I can do this. I really want to lift up Greg Owen. I see Greg just serving left and right. So many people. Greg's calling me, can you help here? Can you help there? And, even for the virtual teen camp, he wants to help out, whatever he can do. And, I just really appreciate, the Owen family. They just want to serve, and they just consistently will do that. And it's definitely something I admire. But let people carry your burdens. Let people carry our burdens, and we have to be willing, right, to carry each other's burdens to make it through the wilderness. You're not superhuman. None of us are superhuman. What is your plan right now to make it through the desert? Do you have a plan to make it through the wilderness? What is your plan to take care of your mental health right now? You know, it's so challenging. This is mentally taxing in our situation. What is your plan to really take care of your well-being during this time? How are you going to deal with your burdens? And does your plan involve allowing other people to help you? We all need help. This is when we need each other more than ever. Right now as a church, this is why we have the church. This is where we need each other. How can you hold up other people's hands right now? Who in your life who's giving all they got, who's trying the best they can, who you see they're tired, you see they're exhausted, you see it's challenging. How can you hold up their arms right now? How can you hold up their hands right now? How can you show somebody you love them, you support them, that you might misunderstand everything that they're trying to do, but that you're there for them? It's when you feel like you can't do it anymore that God does his greatest miracles. Who do you have that can hold your arms up right now? You know, my last point today in, surviving the wilderness, making it through, is don't try to be perfect. You know, we all want to be like, I don't know, Bear Grylls or something in the wilderness. Like the guy that, oh, this is easy for me. I made it through the wilderness and it was nothing, you know. But it is something, and it is hard, and it's real. And we can't try to be perfect. The best we can do is rely on God in the wilderness. And you know, Moses was far from perfect. He got tired. People didn't like him. He had to go to God and vent sometimes. And in verse 4 of in our text, it says, "Then Moses cried out to the Lord, 'What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me.'" I mean, he goes to God, he cries out, he vents to God, you know, and we see, and we know this about Moses, that he hasn't been perfect since we've known him, right? Since we've known him in the Bible, you know. And earlier when God calls Moses, you know what Moses' reply was to being called on this great mission? Exodus chapter 4, verse 10. This was Moses' reply. Moses said to the Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past, nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." So when God calls him on to take on this incredible mission of leading the Israelites out of Egypt, he's like, I can't do it. I'm not good at speaking or articulating. I'm not the guy, right? He's not perfect. He understood he was not perfect. And we see Moses later on. They're grumbling again later on in the text, and they want water, and so he does the same thing with water from a rock, but this time he hits the rock in anger. And so Moses even has sinned in his anger. And it is challenging when we come face to face with our imperfections. It's hard to understand why. It's hard to even accept the fact that we're not perfect sometimes. And you know, for me, one of my imperfections that I would say I've battled with has been, you know, depression and anxiety. And I think depression in a way since, you know, I was 16, 17, around there. And, you know, at different times in my life, it hit a lot harder. And I'm really not at a place, thanks be to God, where the lows are as low and the highs are as highs. And I've shared this story with a lot of people, but it was for me one of those things that made me feel like, man, how could God use me? You know, if I don't even feel like getting out of bed, you know, how is God going to be able to use me? And then it would make me feel like I'm not even worthy, you know, to follow God. I'm not worthy to, you know, to do these things. And so I think that mentality, that mindset can get you to a place of like deep discouragement and even just feeling like, just low. You know, but it was through God that I saw that imperfection was necessary for God's power to be manifested in my life. Like God banked on me being imperfect. That is why he sent Jesus. so that this combination, this marriage of Christ and my imperfections can show God's glory in a way that is otherwise unrecognizable to other people. You know, to follow Jesus, to have a relationship with Jesus, you do not need to be perfect. This is something I share with the teens all the time, but I think for us too as adults, we got to remember, following Jesus is not about being perfect. If that was so, God would not have to have sent Jesus to die for us. So what do we have to do? In John chapter 6, 28 to 29, it says, "Then they asked him, 'What must we do to do the works that God requires?' Jesus answered, 'The work of God is this, to believe in the one he has sent.'" It's about believing. It's about believing that God can use your imperfections for something incredible. It's about believing that Jesus loves you, believing that God is gracious with you, believing that he advocates for you, that believing that when you mess up and you go back to God, he's running out to meet you, believing that everything you're scared of is going to work out. It's believing that this message can apply to you specifically. It's believing that whatever skeleton you may have in your closet, that he still loves you and he can still do something with you. It's believing that God can transform you if you let him. This is how we have to apply our belief. Not just that God is up there, but that God in a very personal way is working through our lives. You believe that way. Sometimes we try to have everything figured out ourselves. We try to map it all out. We try to calculate it. We try to figure it all out. And really, sometimes it's just as simple as just stop trying to figure everything out. Stop trying to get it all calculated and scientific. And just believe that God is going to get us all through it. You know, in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9 through 11, one of my favorite passages, Paul writes, "But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness.'" Your weaknesses are actually necessary. Your imperfection is actually necessary for God's glory to be revealed. And the less and the more perfect you try to come across, the less people will be able to see God. Right? So embrace your imperfections. Don't be insecure about them. These are the things that God is going to transform. I mean, through my depression, I'm able to talk to people about mental illness and where God can meet them in that in a way that, and it's a level of connection that has given me an incredible intimacy with so many awesome people in my life. And so my imperfection God has used that to help make my superpower in a sense. And it's incredible what God can do. You don't have to be perfect because God is. You know, anytime Satan tells you a lie, replace it with God's truth. The Israelites that day, they won an incredible victory, but they drew their strength from God. God wants to give you and me all amazing breakthroughs, yes, even in the wilderness, and give us incredible victories. You do not have to be perfect. Perfection does not need to be a part of your walk with God, but we have to suspect the best in each other. We have to be willing to support each other and carry each other's burdens. And lastly, not trying to be perfect. Is being with God in the wilderness enough for all of us? And I believe that this time in the wilderness can be a time where we rally together, where we unify, and we can really come out of this stronger than ever. But it takes that daily decision to be there for each other, to support each other, and to fight these negative mindsets that we can have as we're in coronavirus and our situations are awful and it's terrible, and you know, the boredom or the anxiety or the angst of my work is always with me because I'm working from home. You know, we just gotta be able to see God through all of that. We will make it through this time, but let's make it through this time, you know, with love in our hearts for each other. Thank you guys so much. I hope this has been helpful. I hope this is going to help us as we survive the wilderness right now. I love you guys. Take care.